Oh, banger.
Welcome back to another episode with Fight Night Picks. As always, we're brought to you by SimBody. Vertiball is now SimBody. If you head on over to their website, simbody.com, you're going to get all the great products that you know and love, including the SimBody Vertiroller and the Vertiball that you have seen most likely here in studio. Look at that. Place it, lock it, attach it, Vertiball, all sorts of great stuff over there if you want to roll out those old tired muscles and you don't want to go with that old lacrosse ball. They're also coming out with that very new product that you can see right in front of you. And if I head on over to my cart, look at that. I've already got a Vertiball over there. Little bit of a deal right there. And if you hit the try for 60 days risk-free, use the promo code FNP and you're going to get 10% off your order. With that code FNP at simbody.com, you're really helping out another local company here in New Brunswick, Canada. Can't wait for it. The new name, SimBody at simbody.com. And as we always say, let's get into it.
A last look at the big card. Be sure to head into the chat and have your say. Let's get into it and join in Fight Night Picks ? Kicks.
And just like that, we're back, Matt. 100% pure Canadian beef. Let's get into it. A big time card coming up today on, you guessed it, Canada Day. As always, one half of your hosting duo, Craig Allen. Twitter and Instagram at Craig Allen FNP. With me to my left, to your right, respective socials, Matt Allen FNP. Eric Cote's loving it. P with the little asterisk hitting us up with the super chat. That is much appreciated. If you can hit up the super chat as P asterisk did, we would really appreciate it. If not, no big deal. You can toss a like. That is just about as good. Stone, Steve, and Joe throwing out a lot of the smoke. Wade's Venture hanging out saying, what's up, gentlemen? We get the Ola happy Canada Day, lads. Matt, I thought it was supposed to rain tonight. Looking like the rain might hold off, so maybe we get to see some of those fireworks downtown. Nice. A big-time day with July 1st. If you guys are tuning in, Starlin Ramirez is probably not doing that if you're hitting up the super chat. Probably not doing that. But if you do look at it, Matt, overall, with a card like this, I mean, it's one of those ones that it stands out ahead of a lot of these Fight Night cards that we've had from the UFC's Apex. There's 7 ranked fighters on the card. Everybody successfully making weight, a record in 29 minutes. Everybody on the card.
Very nice.
Hopping in there, making the weight. A few people out there were like, Yana Kunitskaya, what's that at 144, 144 and a half? Her fight with Karol Rosa, don't forget, that one is at featherweight, so that one should be fun. Let's see. Joe saying, how's the weather up in New Brunswick? It is hot in Maryland. I'll tell you what, I mean, a little bit of an aside, because you guys tuning in to Question Mark Kicks, you're in for these deets. I started, at 10:30 yesterday? I started cutting some branches, then I started mowing the lawn, then I was a weed whacking. It was a 3-shower day. Between that and playing a 9-hole in the afternoon, okay. And there was no tree cover there. Birdie and holes like it was no tomorrow. So Brandon, if you're out there tuning in, he was the golf buddy there yesterday, and when he hits his driver, it sounds like hitting an aluminum bat off a baseball. Wow. It's a lot of fun to listen to and to watch. So a good day yesterday, but really playing it forward and looking at this card that's headlined by Sean Strickland, and we know this. I mean, what is it? 18-fight UFC vet. He's taking on Abus Magomedov. It took him under a minute, under 30 seconds to dispatch a fellow kind of quasi-German character in Dustin Streisfuss. He put him out of there quick, so now he gets to jump way ahead of the queue, gets that ranked opponent, just like Ikram Aliskerov is going to be getting Paulo Costa, who is taking pictures of Tracy Cortez, so that's fun to see on your 600 Twitter views a day. But when you do consider this one, Matt, I mean, a big-time main event in this middleweight division, considering next weekend, right before the 2 title fights, you have Robert Whittaker battling South Africa's Strickland 2+.
What a fight that is.
So middleweight starting to get a little bit of new blood here.
I think this is a really fun fight, too. And at first, when I looked at this main event, it's easy to be down on it, right? You've got Sean Strickland, who's been in umpteen many main events at this point. All of his main events kind of follow the same flow. They're going to be a decision. They're probably going to be a close fight. But for Magomedov, this is a huge opportunity. And every now and then you do see that, right? A guy who gets the opportunity to jump the queue and really make something of himself. And that's the thing. If Magomedov is able to get the win over Strickland in this main event, that's a big deal. Like, that is a life-changing type of a moment that really does insert yourself into maybe not the elite of the elite, you know, to where Robert Whittaker is, to where Adesanya, of course, always is, but it at least gets you into the conversation, and at least it might allow him to get a fight against a Marvin Vettori coming off a big loss, or maybe against Cannonier's got a big win himself. So I do think if Magomedov is able to get this win, it'll be a huge deal. But also, this is a weird main event, because you might look at someone and say they're a 3 dressed up as a 9. I feel like this card might be a 9 shine down to a 3. Because
they're not wasting our time.
They are not wasting our time, but the main event, I feel like it is a little bit easy to kind of roll your eyes at, but I do feel like we have a very deep card ahead of us with a lot of competitive matchups.
I gotta say, I'm sick and tired of Sean Strickland's shtick, and I'm surprised that they're allowing him to go as far as they're at this point. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous.
It's MMA, they hit each other in the head.
Yeah, you got a code of conduct for a reason, and you're just giving this guy a platform.
Does the
to
UFC
be a
have a
doofus.
code of conduct?
Yes, they do. They actually do. Matt, when we talk about possible fight of the nights, though,
I think he's in the
you have Ishmael Bonfim taking on our guy. I mean, Benoit Saint-Denis. And this is a big-time matchup in this welterweight division. And no, it's not. It's actually in the lightweight division because Saint-Denis took on a very interesting fighter in the debut. He got to take on, Elves Zaleski de Santos, and it didn't work out all that great, but he's since beat the Green Mask, Nicholas Stutz, and then his last time out, he looked really, really good. If you look at it for Bonfim, dispatched Terrence McKinney quickly in that first UFC contest. He looked great on Contender Series, and there's 2 brothers and both of them fighting this month. So pretty cool to see that for the Bonfims. I think this is going to be a really big fight.
The fun thing about the Bonfims too is they fight in a style that could make them very fan favorites just without even really talking or getting on the mic. And for this matchup, it's going to be interesting. Saint-Denis is a guy who's really going to press the matchup and be aggressive, use his pace and use his activity. If he runs into a buzzsaw against Bonfim though, it might be a very short fight because he could be answering with a lot of those big power shots. But I think Saint-Denis is going to make a great account of himself. We talk about not only the activity, but just this kind of stick-to-itiveness. I don't think he's going to go down with one big shot, and I think he's going to make this a very competitive fight.
Big-time matchup. And then we have a look at a second pick, Matt. This one a little bit out of left field, but I know you like the guy on the right-hand side because he's a Wildcat, and he's taking on... It's Wildcat versus Bearcat. What wins out of it? Britio taking on Wilson. Wilson taking this fight on 10 days' notice. And if you look at it for Joanderson, Britio... Early stumble against Bill Algeo. He's looked great his last couple of times out. Yeah, I think the best one that he has on his record. I know the last one was impressive, but to beat Andre Fili, that really does mean something to a lot of UFC fans. So I think this is going to be a big-time fight, one that people are really looking forward to.
I do like this matchup a lot because Wilson's a guy who, yes, he is long, he's rangy with his strikes. He likes to get into a brawl every now and then, and he will plant his feet and just throw some big boxing combinations. And if he gets into a matchup like that with a guy like Britio, this should be an absolutely insane fight. But it does come down to how does Wilson react to the pressure of a guy like Britio? Because if he's not able to withstand some of those big flurries, some of that action, then it might not be a very long fight. But it should be an interesting one nonetheless.
It should be a big-time one, Matt, overall. A big-time fight card. There are a fair amount of debuts on this one. If you're looking forward to it next weekend, a pay-per-view featuring... Marcin Prachnio. That's what everybody's going to get excited about. The rematch between a couple of guys that drew their last time out in Jimmy Crute taking on Alonzo Menafield. A lot of strange fights on that one. But we start this weekend off with a big-time matchup between Alexandr Romanov and Blagoy Ivanov. And I'm going to start it this way. I'm going to go a different way. I'm going to say, okay, let's have a look at Fight Night Picks. You can see it down below. I say let us know who you've got there. But it's about 68% at Fight Night Picks going with Romanov in this one. And it's really strange to see the way that the narrative shifted on this because Alexandr Romanov coming into the UFC right up around the heavyweight limit, just dusting guys. Then he comes in, he trims a little bit of weight.
Yeah.
He looks really good, loses one where he's trim, then loses one where he's big, and now all of a sudden people are like, well, the size is a problem. He shouldn't come in so big. So then he comes in this weekend, Matt, right up around that heavyweight limit again, and those same kind of boo birds are coming up. So you've seen these performances where he's lost. The Volkov fight, so he loses to Tybor after having a 10-8 first round. Then round 2, round 3, you have Tybura pulling away. So no big deal. You know Tybura as an Ivanov type, and obviously Tybura just beat Ivanov. And then you look at it, you have Romanov coming in on short notice, jumping in the queue, taking on a top-ranked Alexandr Volkov. He loses that fight in impressive fashion for Volkov, so just awful performance by Romanov, I guess. But out of this one, I mean, you look at a guy like Romanov, you know how powerful he is, especially in that first round. The thing that worries me about this fight is, of course, Romanov's fight that he had against Juan Espino, because of the takedowns that Juan Espino was able to get up against the cage in disadvantageous positions. Blagoy Ivanov for this one, he did an interview, and that's the reason why we do this show, midweek with Cole Shelton from BJPenn.com, and in that one he said he was training primarily out of Drysdale's Jiu-Jitsu, and we've seen Robert Drysdale obviously reach the pinnacle of that sport. MMA, kind of. It seemed like he was going to have a bright future, but Blagoy training there with a lot of heavyweights to get ready for this one. Ivanov, one of those guys that early on, AKA, as well as time at Extreme Tour. So I'm eager to see what version we get out of both of these guys.
I don't think this is going to be a phenomenal fight, if we're going to be completely 100% honest. I said it at the start of the week. This is why I think Blagoy Ivanov has the edge, at least to me personally. I understand why the majority of people are siding with Romanov, but Romanov's going to have to work for a lot of those advantageous positions to get into that top control, to work some of that jiu-jitsu, to work some of his ground and pound. I don't know, A, how readily available those positions are going to be, and B, if he's not able to get that finish within the first couple of big flurries, what version of Romanov are we going to get in that second and third round? Now, is Blagoy Ivanov going to burn at such a hot pace that he's going to outwork himself? No, he's not. But on the flip side, I do worry that Blagoy Ivanov might not make Romanov work enough in that first round for his cardio and his pace to really be advantageous enough in the second and third round to make a difference. So I do think this is a really close fight. I don't think it's going to be a barn burner by any sense of the word, but I do think Blagoy's going to be able to win a lot of those even exchanges on some of the clinches. And that's the thing about Ivanov. He's not going to go out there and Chael Sonnen you, right? He's not Kurt Angle. He's not going to go around your waist, wrap you up, and shoot double legs. He is more likely to go for a lot of the arm and head chokes, or not chokes, sorry, the throws. And I do think since he does like some of those positions, Blagoy loves those underhooks. He might be Dominic Cruz's favorite fighter, so I have Blagoy Ivanov, not because he's going to make it fun, not by finish, just because he's better at some of those even positions.
I think he's bad at striking from range. He's one of those guys that's steady.
I don't disagree.
He fights behind a 1-2, and that's about it. And Blagoy Ivanov hasn't thrown more or landed more than 70 significant strikes since he fought Tai Tuivasa and dropped him in that fight. But Blagoy has just shown a big drop-off in his own right in his last number of performances. His fight that he had against Marcos Rogerio de Lima, like, you could play that in front of, anybody to get them to go to sleep. It's a cure for insomnia. So for me, I do like Alexandr Romanov in this matchup. I think he's going to be able to get the win in the fight. JD, hope everybody's great and has great luck with their picks today. Happy Canada Day, Craig and Matt. No, Matt, we only want you to be 35% honest and the rest never. I find it funny when people say, if I'm being honest. Why wouldn't you be honest all the time, Matt? Matt, our next matchup, we have Ivana Petrovic taking on Luana Carolina. The fans have Ivana Petrovic in this fight because she's undefeated and because Luana Carolina got knocked out by Molly McCann. I bet you less than 15% of the people watching the show watch Ivana Petrovic tape during the week, and they're going to go with Petrovic to get the win. I think Ivana Petrovic loses this fight.
Sometimes she'll make a pick and stand a little too firm.
Outstruck by Luana Carolina on the feet. Petrovic's takedown defense isn't all that great. She likes to fight, the fight starts when Petrovic's back hits the mat because she really does go for a lot of submissions in her fights.
How is the Heat Boss Macy Barber fight going to go?
She's lost the last 3 of her fights until she's come back and won them. One, she won by split decision. I thought that she had lost 2 of the rounds. One, she's losing to a striker until she ends up getting the submission. Her last time out, she wins in the 4th round by submission in a fight where her opponent had come up from strawweight to meet her at flyweight, and she was losing until she rallied back to win it. So for me, I do like Carolina with the strikes. Carolina is one of those fighters like Holly Holm that gets tested in the takedown defense department every fight. And Carolina is a nail in the first round of her fights until she rallies to become the hammer. Round 2, round 3, I like Carolina here.
We're split on on the pick, but I think you're overselling Carolina a bit. I don't think either one of these athletes are all that great, and I think it's going to be a close fight by the time it's all said and done. I do think Carolina is going to have success on the striking, but I don't think she's going to go out there like a prime Max Holloway and just like completely shred her with the volume, look like some kind of an avalanche. I just think Petrovic or Ivana is more likely to maybe get some takedowns. Now, her takedown defense is lacking, but I do favor her and her ability to mix some of her martial arts. I just don't think Luana Carolina at 8-4 has proven me a lot to be like, wow, she's going to go on to be a top 15 fighter. Not that I think that's a ceiling for either one of these two. I'm just going to ever so slightly go with Ivana in the matchup.
Matt going with Ivana Petrovic in the matchup. Matt, our second fight, Guram Kutateladze taking on Elves Brener. And I'm sure most folks are going to be going with Guram Kutateladze in this matchup, and we've seen him have really competitive fights against a couple of guys in the top 15. One, Mateusz Gamrot, who just got that win over Jalen Turner. Turner taking on Dan Hooker next weekend.
That's a big fight.
And if you look at it, Damir Ismagulov, the other fight, Damir up in the co-main event of this card, taking on Grant Dawson. Starsmith, are you guys watching BKFC right now? Never.
Not a fan personally.
Not at all. All right. So, Matt, when you do consider a matchup like this, I mean, for Guram, it's a get-right fight, but it's another one where...
A trapdoor card, though, isn't it?
Yeah, just a few weeks ago, Guram cutting the weight, getting ready to take a fight against Jamie Mullarkey. That about a month ago. The fight fell out. Guram had the visa issues. Now he's in against Brener. Brener was supposed to be fighting Jordan Levitt this weekend, so a short notice throw together for both of these guys. Now, when you look at it for Guram, a good striker, but just like that Red Hot Chili Pepper song, Scar Tissue That I Wish You Saw, Guram gets picked apart by the jabs and the long-range attacks, and he tends to bleed quite a bit like an Nate Diaz. Elvis Brener has gotten significantly better from his time in the Brazilian regional scene to where he is right now. He's one of those ride-or-die blonde-hair warriors like Charles Oliveira, out to shoot the box Diego Lima. So for me, with Brener, he tends to move his head a lot, but into people's fists. And if you look at him, I mean, he'll go southpaw to throw the body kick, orthodox to throw the boxing combination. So I think it's going to be a really fun fight, and I think it's going to be a more competitive fight than somebody might sell it to you as.
It should be a competitive fight, but it is a fight that's kind of set up for Guram to win, because he has looked really good against competitive matchups, or in competitive matchups, against fighters that we all know and recognize. Like you mentioned, like Damir Ismagulov is a very talented fighter, and so is Gamrot. So having really close matchups with them does prove that, hey, you might be, and I think you alluded to this at the start of the week, he kind of is that 16th ranked fighter right now in the lightweight division, because if you beat him, well, you're probably going to get ranked. He is that talented of a fighter, and if he wins any matchup against a big name, well, there's a good chance he himself can slot into that top 15. I do worry about him outside of some of those big actions, and you bring it up. The jab can piece him up. He's a guy who has great power in his hands and really powerful kicks too, but it does take him a second to wind some of those up, and if he's fighting a very busy fighter, they can get on the inside and at least make him pay for some of those bigger actions, and I do think that's an area Brener can have success in. The problem is, I still think he's going to get hit by those big shots, and I think those big shots are going to accumulate.
And when you consider it for a guy like Elvis Brener, he's one of those oddball type of fighters. Brener's one of those guys, as well as Westin Wilson, who's on this card. Brener, really high Thai stance. You saw him fight Takugov, and he looks like a Thai fighter. All he does is strike and defend takedowns. But his biggest asset is the submissions, at least in terms of the win percentages. And if you look at a guy like Wilson, same thing can be said, only out of that kind of sidewinder karate stance. And he really does go for it. So for me, I do have Guram Kutateladze in the matchup. But Mr. Cucumber saying, skip this fight, no chance for Brener. Guram's way too active and good putting pressure, but it's really hard to tell that when you don't see Guram fight all that often. He's had knee injuries, he had a rib injury, he's had a lot of different issues getting ready for some of these fights. If you consider it at Fight Night Picks, 89% of the fans going Guram. I mean, both of us going with Guram, but a tricky matchup and not necessarily like, oh, it's 100% Guram for that L word. So you look at the next matchup, this one at featherweight, I don't know why.
At featherweight really is the key word, right? Because I feel like at 135, at least for me personally, I would have picked Karol Rosa, not really thought twice about it. I think she's the more damaging striker. I think at least physically, Yana does strain herself enough down to 135 to where she won't be able to just ragdoll Karol Rosa in the clinch. Not saying that's what could happen in this matchup, but it could happen in this matchup, right? I do think Santos in the clinch is a situation where she can have a lot of success in, but B, she's an active grappler. She does like a lot of those hip tosses, and Karol Rosa, with her boxing style, does have to get quite close to her opponent to really land some of those damaging shots that she is going to need in the matchup. Now, by saying all of that, I do think since Santos' face shows a lot of damage, that's going to play an effect in this matchup because Rosa might need, let's say, 20 strikes to go through and win a round. But since Santos' face does show quite a bit of damage, it might lower that to only 15, 16 before we really start to see some of that wear and tear on the face of Yana. But this is an interesting fight because you brought it up earlier. What are they really fighting for at 145? Like, the champion is now left. The division doesn't even exist on the UFC's website, and it hasn't for a while now. It's just 145's been a weird spot. If it's just so that both athletes don't have to kill themselves making weight, I'm all for that personally. But it is just a weird division, them still considering this a featherweight fight and not just like a catchweight fight, I guess.
I love Jonathan hits up the chat. Now, every couple of weeks, I mean, he's a Fight and Phil's fan. Karol Rosa by split. Another waste of time. Split decision, and Rosa doesn't even fight until the third round. If you watch more than her last two fights, bud, if you watch these Karol Rosa fights, she tends to really pick up as it goes on, for sure. I mean, you look at the fight that she had against Lena Landsberg, obviously the illegal shot, and then it ends up kind of in murky waters for the decision. If you look at her the last time out against Norma Dumont, she turned it on strong in the third round, landed that shot that dropped her opponent Dumont, and then she squares up and clinches up. Yeah. And it was just really poor striking and really poor fight IQ in the matchup. I do like Karol Rosa in this fight, but if Yana Santos is able to really clinch her up, make it boring, make it gritty, Yana Santos is the kind of the picture perfect type of fighter to go ahead and win a fight like that. So it wouldn't be a surprise if Santos won this.
And she has good enough offensive submissions to where it's not like she has to go out there and just win a decision, right? There is a world where she could go out there, get a submission via armbar. She has good chokes too, but the armbar is at the forefront of her game. So I think Santos does have enough tools to go out there and win this fight, but I still do have Rosa in the matchup.
Matt, almost 400 tuning in on a Saturday afternoon for Fight Night card on Canada Day. Toss a like, that would be much appreciated. We move into that wild man bearcat type of fight. You have one guy in Joanderson Britio that really does go for it. And if you look at it for Westin Wilson, I mean, just a paltry level of competition. Anybody good, he's lost to, and anybody that's not so good, he's pretty well beaten. He's one of those big fish, small pond type of guys like Terrence Mitchell that you're going to see next weekend. He's the biggest example of that. And if you went back and watch Nick the Tooth, Dana White's looking for a fight. Really? Or the Ultimate Fighter, Terrence Mitchell. He's there, but Alaska's own. You look at it for Wilson, I mean, upstate karate, trains with Wonder Boy. Wonder Boy on the Ultimate Fighter with Conor McGregor. I mean, catching L's when they're leaks, catching L's during the week. That fight's not even going to happen, so they say. It's just weird. But Wilson coming in on 10 days' notice to take on Joanderson Britio. I do think that Britio gets a win here.
This is my only real question for you, because we both have Britio. Is there a world where Westin Wilson can go out there and kind of outlast Britio and at least make this an interesting fight sort of down the stretch? Because Britio is somebody who uses a ton of energy for everything offensively he does, right? And I know he's fought guys who could at least have put together game plans that should be able to follow that, but he has been able to overcome and outlast them. Do you think there is a world where Wilson can go out there and at least kind of avoid some of those bigger power shots, have good enough takedown defense, or at least threaten enough with his submissions once it does hit the mat to at least make this a long fight, or is Britio just too strong in most areas?
Yeah, I mean, if I consider it, you look at a guy like Bill Algeo, long, tall,
exactly.
For this
He's fought
division,
guys.
rangy.
Caceres is a guy you'd think, hey, avoid big shots, take it late.
Yeah, but Bill Algeo had fought a way better level competition, and he could show that he could mix all the parts of his game. Westin Wilson, it's kind of crazy when he throws those kicks, and at the same time that he kind of lands on the mat with his foot that was up in the air, he's grabbing that single leg and going for the takedown. Wilson just didn't really take on the greatest of levels of fighters. And for me, going back and watching it when you're taking on, like the last time out, an 8-5 fighter, and you're beating him, but you're taking some shots, it's just not really the best to then show, okay, listen, Westin Wilson, he's that guy. So both of us in this one going with Joanderson Britio rather. But it should be a fun fight while it lasts, because again, both these guys tend to burn pretty darn hot. And Britio, the win that shows that he can kind of overcome a fighter like this, Diego Lopez on Contender Series. I know it went to a technical decision and it was a 29-28 because it was a 10-10 third round. All there was an eye poke and then it ended. So for me, I do have Britio, you have Britio. Yeah. And then we move into the fight of the weekend, Matt. Kevin Lee's taking on Rinat Fakhretdinov. I'm going to go back through the notes and have a look at this one really quick, but if you do look at a guy like Rinat, already 2-0 in the UFC, the win to kind of put him over was the one over Eric Spicely where he dropped him and finished him with the Eagle FC UAE Warriors card. That was looking FWD to a fight. FWD, like WD-40, but forward. So, Matt, you consider it for Rinat. I mean, he is a wrestler. He's a wild striker. He's nowhere near the striker of a prime Kevin Lee. And for Kevin Lee, his last time out, didn't really leave a good image with the fans. When we're talking, it's probably 1.5 million views on YouTube now when he took on Diego Sanchez.
You bring up he's a better striker than Kevin Lee, or probably not as good of a striker as Kevin Lee. Kind of going to break that down a bit because Kevin Lee, for as good of an offensive striker as he is, he does lack quite a bit in some defensive categories, especially in his striking game. Even in fights where Kevin Lee wins, we see him get clipped by some big power shots. I always go back to the big Edson Barbosa wheel kick. Now, fortunately, his wrestling is good enough to where he can outwork some of those positions, right? But go back to the Ferguson fight. I know he lost that fight. He was out wrestling Tony Ferguson pillar to post in that. It wasn't a close fight at all until Ferguson was able to start making it a competitive fight, started making Kevin Lee work. And I do think there's two big factors in this fight. A, how is Kevin Lee going to look at 170 in this matchup? Because Rinat, at least during the face-offs, looked quite a bit bigger than him physically. So I do think Rinat's going to not only be the bigger guy, but probably the stronger of the two athletes. So for Kevin Lee, how's his cardio going to look at 170? And can he go out there and out-wrestle a guy like Fakhretdinov? Because Kevin Lee has great offensive wrestling, and I honestly think Kevin Lee is one of the better wrestlers in the division in the UFC because he mixes his wrestling well with his jiu-jitsu, and he's not just a one-note grappler like a lot of these athletes are. I think Kevin Lee can have success, but I don't know if he's going to be able to avoid some of those bigger power shots until he gets it down.
Kevin Lee, if it would happen, let's say Conor McGregor just screws right off, doesn't end up kind of headlining the Ultimate Fighter finale. Kevin Lee, Michael Chandler is the fight that I want to see, although they both train at a kill cliff, so it'll never happen, or it probably won't happen. But if they both fought each other at 170, that'd be a fun fight because both of those guys mix their wrestling so well with their jiu-jitsu. You've seen it out of Chandler outlast guys when he decides to wrestle. It hasn't happened in the UFC. I know that because that's what he used to do when he was with Bellator. He wasn't the one punch
Even then,
quitter
he
in
tried
some
to
of
get
his fights.
wild.
But when you look at this one, I mean, for Kevin Lee, it definitely is a tough fight to come back to. They're not just giving him a layup. If you look at it at Fight Night Picks over on Instagram in the story, 79% going with Fakhretdinov to get the win. And the last time that Kevin Lee was this big of an underdog or thereabouts was UFC 216 against Tony Ferguson. And he looked great at the start of that fight. And then he started to wear down as it went on. And was there staph infection on that chest? Was there not? I don't know. Kevin Lee, Kelvin Gastelum. They always have those same issues. Kelvin, catching strays. I apologize. But going with Rinat in the matchup. This is the headliner of the prelims. And there were some people that were like, wow, they're not burying him on the prelims. The headliner of the prelims. This guy headlined, 6 shows and 1 pay-per-view?
Headline a pay-per-view, yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of crazy to see that this is where they put him instead of like a co-main event slot. All right, Matt. Then we get into a really weird fight. And I want to know, if you guys over there in the chat, I'll give you your due here. Did you guys watch Nursultan Ruziboev tape when you were getting ready for this fight against Bruno Ferreira? Because it's weird. It's really, really weird.
I think Chris Sale would be his worst nightmare. Just the way that guy can bend his arm.
It's like watching Ivana Petrovic tape getting ready for this fight. Both of them nails until they're hammers in their fights. But for Nursultan, it's a lot of first round being the nail until he turns it on.
And he has great offensive skills. That's the thing. Like, if you just want to isolate some moments in his fights, he's a really active fighter off his back. He never really stops in moments. He's not one of these fighters, and everybody knows how much I hate them at this point. Just a lockdown, look at the ref, please get me out of this, because he does go for the Kimura. Talked about that a lot at the start of the week. He likes triangles as well. He'll use that not only for the submission, but to just get out of a bad position. It's going to be interesting, though, because you bring it up. He's the nail a lot in some of these striking engagements. Then it gets down to the mat. Then he can have success. If you're the nail against Bruno in a striking engagement, there's not really any kind of anything after. Like, the fight's over. It's just, like, no. He has that one-of-one power that I don't really think you want to have kind of a Mickey Mouse style against, where you want to play possum and then come back in the second half of the fight.
So, Ruziboev, 34 wins, 32 of them by finish, 24 of them in the first round, and he's got 7 in a row, all by finish in his last number of fights. So, all of those finish wins. His combined opponent record, this for the fighter out of Uzbekistan, 311, 162, and 2. But if you go and actually look at the records, it's not really the greatest level competition. Ruziboev's last win over a 12-12 fighter where his opponent takes him down, and then all of a sudden, Ruziboev scrambles out of it, and he ends up getting the finish. And I see it at a JD. I mean, Bruno Ferreira, and the name kind of evaded me for a second, and then I got it when we made the video at the start of the week, because he fights next weekend. He reminds me a lot of Vitor Petrino, who's going to be fighting that guy. People are buying the pay-per-view. People are going to be excited because it's a return of Marcin Prachnio, who is all over his own Instagram. He used to be a ghost before, and now he's all
really
about it.
Selling that show.
Bruno and Vitor Petrino, a couple of guys that they burn really hot, and I worry how their gas tanks are going to work. Now, Petrino showed us that if you can outlast, I know he's been bad in the UFC, but trust me, if you can outlast Anton Turkalj with all the takedowns and all the grappling, your cardio must be all right. For Bruno, just a first-round guy. All 10 wins, all of them early. So eager to see how this one goes. Joey Tierney saying the question to me is cardio, and that's definitely about it for me. I will go with Bruno Ferreira, the black belt in jiu-jitsu and judo, and the heavy-handed striker. But it's a tricky fight because for Ruzibov, when he is striking, it's single kick, reset, play around on the outside, jab, reset, wait. And it's not even like an establishing distance. It's wait for your opponent to come in.
And Bruno can close that distance like that. So.
And get it going. So, yeah, I think this is going to be a fun one. But, yeah, both of us going with Ferreira in the matchup. So then we get excited for a possible fight of the night. This one between Ismael Bonfim and Benoit Saint-Denis. Benoit is one of those guys out of the Venom Training Center in Paris that is going to go out there and just out-muscle a lot of his opponents. We'll see if he can do that against Bonfim, who has an interesting submission game to go along with that pro boxing experience. And we saw the takedown defense tested his last time out in the debut against Terrence McKinney. It was a slight underdog spot for Bonfim. The fans overwhelmingly had McKinney. And then, of course, for Bonfim, I mean, he put a poster together when he threw that flying knee against Terrence McKinney. And he had him hurt before that at multiple points, too. So a little bit of a peekaboo style. The first strike that McKinney, or one of the first strikes that McKinney had thrown was the flying knee. It landed on the chest. And then you had Ishmael getting the crowd into it down in Rio. So I think this is going to be a really fun fight. If Benoit got the win and he was able to just kind of grind on Bonfim, that would be really interesting to see. But for me, I do like Bonfim in the matchup, and I think that boxing is going to play out quite well for him. And I like the takedown defense, but if anybody's going to test it, it's Benoit with the power that he puts into those.
And he gets a lot of his work done from up close. So it really does come down to, can Bonfim hurt Saint-Denis enough so that his takedown, or at least his clinch control, won't matter? Because I don't think it's just going to be a matter of, oh, Saint-Denis got his hands around him, he's now down to the ground. I do think he's going to have to work for some of those positions, but he's still the better grappler if he's able to get on top. Not that I discredit Bonfim's submission ability or submission acumen, but Saint-Denis isn't going to get submitted by a guy off the bottom all that often. Like, unless you're a Brian Ortega type, we'll bring up Tracy Cortez again, I guess, but unless you're a Brian Ortega type, like, it's really difficult to go out there and get wins in that capacity. Guys don't really get jiu-jitsu wins off their back that much. Fabricio Verdum, Ortega, there's not that long of a list. But Bonfim can at least threaten with some of those guillotines, I think, especially while they're on the feet. So he can deter Saint-Denis from going for so many positions. But I do agree with you. I just think Bonfim's the more damaging of these two while they are on the feet. And if that's the case, I think he's going to hurt Saint-Denis quite a bit.
And that was the thing, if you went back and you watched the tape on Benoit Saint-Denis over with Brave before he came into the UFC, Luan Santiago was one of those wins where you beat a really accredited K1 guy. You look at his fight against Paweł Kiliak, where it was originally a win for Kiliak, but there was a little bit of a clash of heads. It opened up a giant cut on Benoit, and so it was considered a no contest after the fact. But JJM MMA saying, Saint-Denis is very durable, but I'm going with Bonfim, and a lot of people talking about durability. Benoit is made of that stuff. I mean,
for sure.
An SAS guy, he's got zero quit in him, so if you look at this one, I don't see anything evading Benoit Saint-Denis whatsoever, but it's tough to beat a guy like Ismael Bonfim. If anybody does, outside of the rankings, it could be Benoit Saint-Denis. But I do like Bonfim here. We'll have a look at Fight Night Picks for the total votes in our poll. At Fight Night Picks on the Instagram, 68% going with Bonfim to get the win here. Eldar saying, Bonfim brothers. Craig Hart, Bonfim has double the octagon time. There is that as well.
If Bonfim wins this, could we say like him versus Drew Dober? He's coming off a loss. He's a high-profile guy. That'd be fun.
Yeah, or whoever loses out between Jalen Turner and Dan Hooker.
Yeah, that'd be a good one,
like
too.
that. I think
because I feel like he is getting pushed to that level, right? Like, they're not going to make him fight 6 or 7 unranked guys. I think he will start to get bigger names before he just, keeps on fighting guys at the lower levels.
All right, Matt. So then we get into a fight where I think Ariane Lipski wins. I think we're split on this one.
Well, it's an oil and water fight, I think. I don't really think Melissa Gatto is going to go out there and win a decision, right? If it does go to the scorecards,
never happened.
That's true. But for Lipski, her striking is a lot better on the outside. I know we have talked a lot about Gatto's improvements in her striking, but it's still not on the level and not complete, I would say, enough to be on the level of someone like Lipski's. Her submission ability, though, is, and she does have that one-hit, one-kill ability off her back, and that's why I do have her in the matchup. I don't know if this fight's going to be great or not. I think there's a world where this fight could be kind of fight of the night style stuff if Lipski is very damaging with her own strikes, because it should force a lot of those desperation takedown attempts out of someone like Gatto. But I think one of those takedown attempts is going to get through, and I think for that reason, that's why I have it.
And the thing about Gatto is, you look at the length, you look at the range. I mean, maybe she doesn't have the height advantage in the fight, but when it gets into the clinch, both these women can excel. I think Gatto can start to land some of those really tricky shots, the knees. And if you look at it for Gatto on the mat, whether she's on top or with her back to the mat, she's able to really pull off a lot of those submission wins. You saw that Gatto win over Karol Rosa in 2018, and then an abbreviated debut in 2021 due to some USADA complications there for her. But her striking got a lot better. I mean, Jonathan doesn't like these fights. He's not a fan of the women's fights. So Jonathan just putting it all out there on the line. I do like Lipski in this one. And I think the changes to the camp, again, Lioness Studio treated her well her last time out. However,
For sure.
I think Aldrich had an off night that night. You got to give credit where it's due, and Lipski looked good. But I just, Aldrich...
Craig Allen, an Aldrich apologist.
Yeah,
some
the
might
strike,
say.
the striking
Wow.
really, it just wasn't there for her that night. So split on the pick on this one, and we move forward, Matt. I mean, the young man getting the opportunity. We got Michael Morales taking on Max Griffin. Griffin 4-1 in the 5-on-in. The one loss to a ranked opponent, Neil Magny. And if you look at it, Max Griffin's dropped a fair amount of fallers here lately. I mean, he's got that knockdown ratio at 8-1 in his UFC tenure, but that 8-1 ratio doesn't tell you anything about the amount of times that Max Griffin has been rocked,
Put on skates.
and just wobbled and stood tall. So good for Max Griffin that way. But if you consider a matchup like this, I mean, even for Michael Morales at the young age 24, he's been off for about a year, and in those 2 wins that he has, Trevin Giles is putting it on him until Morales swung that right hand out, clipped Giles, and then he was able to drop him, get him back up, drop him again. And his last time out against Adam Fugett, again, about a year ago, it was a competitive first round, a competitive second round, and then in the third round, Morales is able to get the win. Morales has been going so hard in these fights that it's really been kind of away from what we saw on his way up. Even in that Dana White's Contender Series fight against Vered Tetnikov, he's really going out there, fighting a methodical game plan. He's just been going full steam ahead in these last 2, and it could lend him to getting clipped by a guy like Max Griffin, a real ring general out there. Real ring general.
Bringing up Max Griffin's knockdown for and against rate would be like if I only talked about Fred VanVleet's 3-point percentage and didn't bring up the fact that he only shoots 39% from the field. Because that's the thing about Max Griffin. We've seen him get hurt so many times in the UFC now that it has reached that concerning level. And that's really what I put on this fight. Yes, Griffin can move forward, use his jab, and use his boxing quite effectively. But he's a fighter who, under his terms, he's like a borderline top 15 fighter when he's moving forward, when everything's clicking on all cylinders. But when he is forced to move backwards, he will try to plant his feet and go a little bit more for the power shot and not just let his boxing combinations flow as much.
But it's worked for him.
It has worked for him until he fights some of the upper echelon guys. I know he's 4-1 in his last 5, but the one time he fought Neil Magny, the only kind of top guy, he did get beat quite badly. And Neil Magny at this point in his career isn't really thought of as like, ooh, some big world beater. That's why for me, Max Griffin has a much better record than somebody like a Tim Means or a Matt Brown at this stage of his career. But to me, he's in that category of he's going to offer you a tremendously fun fight no matter what. Griffin's probably going to win a lot more than those 2 other guys will, but he's going to force guys to their limits. I just think a guy like Morales is going to be able to hit him on the chin at a certain point because Griffin's durability, it hasn't faltered completely. But it's bent so many times that I'm concerned it's going to break at one of these points.
I do have Morales in the matchup. 82% of the fans at Fight Night Picks down there in that poll, or down there, but you can find it on Instagram, are going with Morales to get the win, but there's a lot of question marks just after the 2 UFC fights. It wasn't the greatest level of competition on the way up through, but you can see, I mean, a national Ecuadorian wrestling champ. His parents have a great lineage in the martial arts, and Morales, one of those guys. And next weekend, you got quite a bit of representation out of that Entram gym as well, with Brandon Moreno taking on Pantoja.
Great
a couple
fight.
of other fighters sprinkled in there as well. So it should be a fun one. Yeah, and Drew saying, stop the Matt Brown slander. Did you not watch the last one?
Hey, no one here is slandering Matt Brown. We just got to call it like it is.
All right, Matt. So in our co-main event, Malone Hart hitting up the super chat.
Thank you, Malone Hart.
Do y'all think Max Griffin is somewhat underperformed based on his physical traits?
It's hard to say. Max Griffin has had a really good career, but the problem is he's one of these guys who's forever sort of a 15 to 20, but never a top 15 fighter. And there's nothing wrong with that. Not everybody's going to break through, but he's had a memorable tenure in the UFC. That's for sure.
Like that fight of the night against Elves Zaleski dos Santos is absolutely wild. I reference it quite a bit at the start of the week, but lost a split decision to Oliveira. The Morono fight was wild. The Neil Magny lost by split, Curtis Millender, and then Colby Covington. I mean, you look at the wins that he has. Eric Montano's not in the UFC. Mike Perry's not in the UFC. Imadaev's not in the UFC. Brahimaj doesn't fight very often. Sung Kanan, I think they got rid of Kanan after he lost Ian Gary. Carlos Condit, I don't believe fights anymore. And then Tim Means is still around. So hard to say there. But the Super Chat, Malone Hart, much appreciated. Listen, you know what? For this week,
you the MVP.
It's Canada Day. You get the weekly trophy that we rarely dust off. But right there for Malone Hart. MVP chants are going on. If you could throw memes down, I'm sure the Kevin Durant meme would get used.
Just to go on to this fight, I guess. I have a hard time with this fight, and this is why. At what stage of Carmelo Anthony's career is Damir Ismagulov right now? Is this the OKC tenure? I only say that because for Damir, he is at this weird point where we all know how talented he is. We all know how skilled he is.
It's not Trailblazers.
But, well, he went to the Lakers. Just let me finish this thought. But for Damir, we all know how good he is. It's just a matter of, hey, really go out there and show me at the highest level because he's been in some close fights. He's been in some really entertaining fights, and he's been able to show us how skilled he is, but he's never really been able to dominate like a lot of these other top 15 fighters have at some point throughout their career. You bring up
Gorgie's fight.
You bring up Dan Hooker. Dan Hooker's fighting next week. Dan Hooker might not be the fighter he used to be because he's been through a lot of really difficult fights, but at one stage of Dan Hooker's fight, he was blowing the doors off everybody. Like, he flying kneed Jim Miller in 30 seconds, and it wasn't even close fight. For Damir, he's had great performances, but it would be nice to see him really go out there and kind of showcase all of his skills. I don't know if Grant Dawson's the opponent he'll be able to do that against, because for Damir, he does like using the whole totality of his own game, and if he tries to go to the ground with Grant Dawson's difficult to grapple with no matter who you are, and he's so offensive with his grappling that even if he gets you down for only a little bit, he goes for so much ground and pound that he will use a lot of those positions advantageously. How many grapplers do we see? They get the fight in the top spot, but if they don't get the submission, it's all kind of wasted because they're not doing enough with their ground and pound. Grant Dawson is never one of those fighters.
The thing that I don't get, and I see it there, I mean, we got Damir's last 5 fights are by decision. He's not the same. That's hard to say. But Craig, you like the fake glove touch head kick in UFC 4 the other day. What? I have no idea. I haven't played UFC 4 in a long time. So when you do consider this matchup, Matt, I mean, for Damir Ismagulov, he's one of those guys, complete game plan, complete skill set. First round, a little bit slow finding his way into the fight. Round 2, round 3, that's where Damir typically shines. Grant Dawson, one-hitter quitter when it starts, tends to fade as these fights go on. But Grant's beaten a couple of really interesting opponents his last 2 times out. You saw that when he's taken on a guy in Jared Gordon. Pre-head clash, Jared Gordon, but we didn't know, said the UFC. And then, of course, Mark Madsen. Both those wins are counterintuitive because they're in the 3rd round. But when you look at a guy like Damir, and you consider it, if the floor is lava, he can definitely go out there and get a win over Grant Dawson. In the striking, Dawson's gotten better as a striker, but I just don't know if he's going to be able to keep up with a guy like Ismagulov.
It's not completely the same as like a Gatto versus Lipsky, but same idea, right? It's going to come down to how many improvements has Grant Dawson been able to make. I don't know if he's going to be able to do enough on the outside against Ismagulov, and that really is the issue, because when Damir's able to get his straight shots involved, it allows him to keep a much lower posture, which then helps him defend takedowns. And from that boxing stance, I do think it's going to be difficult for Grant Dawson to get on the inside.
So, Matt, it should be an interesting one. At Fight Night picks for the total votes on this one, and it is 62% going with Ismagulov to get the win. B-Rip, OSP versus Jean Vellante. No, you're the only guy who would pick Vellante. Buddy, unless you're the computer playing me at 2K, that's the only video game I've been rocking. All right, Matt, we get to the main event. About 430 tuned in, only 91 likes. Takes 2 seconds. Toss a like out there. Get it moving. Matt, this main event, Abus Magomedov taking on Sean Strickland here in the chat. 58% going with Sean Strickland to get the win. 42% with Abus Magomedov. If you have Magomedov, let us know why down below. Because if you look at it recently, I mean, 3 straight wins for Magomedov. His last time out in under a minute against Dustin Stoisfuss. Gets that big-time opportunity to take on a top 10 guy in Sean Strickland, who's been close to the mountaintop. He's had main events. He's won more than he's lost in terms of those main events. You see that highlight kind of creeping out there on Twitter today to get the momentum going for Strickland, finishing Brendan Allen, who looked great last weekend. So if you look at it for Sean Strickland, I mean, just a real momentum type of fighter. And for Abus Magomedov, such slick striking, really crisp with mixing up his strikes and camouflaging things. And I know that's easy to say if you just watch his last fight, but if you go back and watch the complete tape study, it is a very, very impressive fighter. That is Abus Magomedov out of UFD gym. So I think this is going to be a fun fight. Let's see, over there in the comments section, Raw Torque, Sean after the second, Steppen Park saying Sean needs a finish. And Alex Fox wants to see you hitting that like mountains. That's why we go Abus. So Matt, let's see what you're thinking on this one here.
I have a hard time with the fight because Magomedov's a fighter who does require a lot of range to have success. He really does like to implement his kicks. Not only did we see that the last time out, but really throughout his whole career. He loves the front kick to the body. It is very Tony Ferguson-esque. It helps him maintain distance. It's also a damaging shot too. But my problem is Magomedov does like to fight moving backwards sometimes. And if you're fighting moving backwards against a fighter like Sean Strickland, it just helps him go downhill. It's like a team that commits a lot of turnovers playing against the Milwaukee Bucks. You're going to get dunked on by Giannis a lot, because guess what? All those steals are going to force it the other way in fast break. So I just think for Magomedov, he can have all of the success with his game plan, but the problem is he'll put it into areas where Sean Strickland can have the most success. So for Strickland, if he is the fighter that he used to be, and I don't think he is on this big decline by any means, I just think for Sean Strickland, he's fought a lot of the best fighters in the division, so hey, you're not going to beat them all. But it is interesting to see, because we've talked about this a lot in the middleweight division. It's not the best division out there. The separation between unranked and top 10 is probably the least of any division. So if anybody is going to be able to kind of jump themselves in and advance up the queue, it is going to be someone in Magomedov's position.
And we've seen it recently. Obviously, your second to last champ being Alex Pereira really continued to jump the queue. He fought Strickland, he beat him, and then he got a title shot out of it. And I think if Magomedov wins, it's not going to be a title shot next, but since September 2016, there's only been 3 fighters that had their first UFC fight, then a main event slot. Chris Cyborg, and then she ended up fighting for the title. Yuri Prohashka, then for the title, and Michael Chandler. And it was a title fight in his second UFC fight after beating Dan Hooker. So a big opportunity for Abus Magomedov. I do have Sean Strickland in the fight. But when you do consider it, I mean, this is a big-time matchup in this division. And obviously, the unranked party here has a lot of fan support. We've seen that all week in the comments. You've seen that on Twitter and Instagram as well. It should be a big-time matchup in this one. And as you know, with Fight Night Picks and Question Mark Kicks, we stacked the deck one more time throughout this one. The big fight's here. But, of course, next weekend, I know the folks are really amped for this one. I mean, listen, this one from Vegas, T-Mobile.
2 incredible title fights.
Volkanovski Rodriguez, and then, of course, Brandon Moreno taking on Pantoja once more. I mean, just give me another helping of that fight at flyweight.
I feel like people aren't respecting, maybe not just the whole pay-per-view, but the main event enough. I think a lot of people just assume, oh, Volkanovski, he's pound for pound #1. He's going to go in there and just run over Yair, but that's a great fight. Yair looked phenomenal his last time out against Josh Emmett, and ever since we have seen him be a little bit more consistent, not take these massive breaks off, he has been making these huge improvements throughout his career, so I think that's going to be an incredible fight.
Big-time fight, Matt. First one on this weekend's card. Romanov taking on Ivanov. Malone Hart, Super Chat. Is Canada Day a big deal for y'all?
I like it. I'm a fan.
Yeah, I'm a pretty big fan. I'm looking forward to the fireworks later on tonight. Romanov, Ivanov, give me Romanov.
I've got Ivanov.
All right, Matt. Then we have our next matchup between Petrovic and Carolina. Going with Carolina.
I'll go with Petrovic.
All right, Matt. Will the kiss of death be Petrovic taking a picture at the PI with Aljamain Sterling? We'll see. We'll see. He's still the champ, so we will see.
Looking thick.
Guram Kutateladze. Which one?
Aljamain.
Okay. Kutateladze taking on Brener, going with Guram.
We keep it professional. I've also got Guram. Where does he go next, though? Like, does Guram fight Kevin Lee if they both win? Yeah, you never thought of that, did you guys? We're getting crazy now.
B-Rip, chugging some maple syrup in honor of the boys. We did that on the Vancouver card not that long ago. Yeah, you can't go to that well too many times. Yana Santos taking on Karol Rosa, going with Karol Rosa.
Going with Karol Rosa.
William learning something today that we're brothers. First time, long time. Matt, the next matchup, Britio taking on Wilson, going with Britio.
Give me Britio.
All right, then we have Lee taking on Fakhretdinov. Fakhretdinov is the pick here.
I've got Fakhretdinov, but I have a hard time with this one.
Then we have Ruziboyev taking on Fajera. It feels like a trap card. I'll go Fajera, but it's tricky.
Give me Bruno. He's so hot right now.
Bruno. Matt, the next matchup, Bonfim taking on Saint Denis. Going with Bonfim.
Going with Bonfim. I do think he has the potential to be a real high-level prospect in the division.
All right. Then we have a big-time fight between Lipski and Gatto. I have Lipski. I don't love it.
I'm going with Gatto.
All right. Then we have Griffin taking on Morales. I also don't love it. I do have Morales in the match.
I've got Morales in this one.
All right, Matt. Co-main event is Magulov taking on Grant Dawson. Going with Demir, but we didn't talk about it here, but we talked about it at the start of the week, and some people filled up the chat with it. Demir, right after his last fight, seemed like he retired. Then he said, I have one fight left and I want to fight Arman again. That fight didn't happen, so now he gets another ATT guy in Grant Dawson. Still going with Demir, But retirement talk and saying you got one fight left with the promotion is always bad. Look at Askarov.
As long as it's not Lakers or Portland Carmelo, I think he's going to win. So as long as it's Knicks, Nuggets, or OKC, I've got Demir.
All right, and in the main event, Strickland versus Magomedov, going with Sean Strickland.
I've also got Sean Strickland, but I have a hard... Again, if Magomedov was able to move backwards, use his kicks effectively, and really keep Sean Strickland far away from
Which
him...
he does quite often.
Use those kicks, especially to the legs, but we talk about this all the time. Kick his legs! And then Sean Strickland checks all of them and uses his boxing, makes it really uncomfortable for his opponent, so I've also got Strickland.
Toss a like on the way out. Make sure you check out those videos for UFC 290. That's International Fight Week. There will be no question mark kicks next weekend. I'm away all week, so there's no question mark kicks. And if there's any updates to be done, we'll figure out a way to do them. Maybe we'll do like an Instagram live, do something quick, pop on the earbuds. But yeah, looking forward to UFC 290, that full card video to come out in the not so distant future. Make sure you check that one out. Make sure you keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. And as we always say, let's get into it.